Well, folks, welcome to another edition of Living in Calgary. Today, I am pleased to have my old friend, James Kendal, on the show. James and I met back in 2010 well, you wouldn't believe it. Well, I actually have met a few friends like James on Twitter. On Twitter, we met on Twitter, Follow Friday somehow. And I remember that. That was great. James is, and then as we got to know each other, we were chasing each other's on bike racing, and we've become quite good competitors and good friends as we try to hold each other's wheel. And James has surpassed my wheel and moved on to higher levels in the bike racing community here in Alberta. He's a Cat 1-2 racer. Well, meanwhile, I stayed pretty much Cat 3, and he lives in Canmore with his wife, Misty, of 18 years, 11-year-old daughter, Allison. He's worked in a long career in hospitality in the winery, lots of wineries, hotels and restaurants. And currently, recently, 4 or 5 years ago, James, and we'll get into a little bit, I was quite worried about you with cancer. He beat it. I think he went out to stage 4 cancer, and he is bike racing again and has been for at least a couple of years, and are not really because of COVID, but training and currently getting ready for cyclocross season and working on a new startup. James, welcome to the show.
Hey, well, thanks, Bryon. It's great to see you. And I don't think I've seen you in person since we did a big ride, a ride for Ryan a couple of seasons last year, right?
Not quite just in May of 2020, May of 2020, COVID.
2020, that's right, yeah.
That was such a pleasure to do, and that kind of started out the COVID season. So tell us a little bit of that ride, James. It was up to that point my second longest ride ever. We did like 270K or something, right?
Yeah, we did. It was 250 and change, and that was also my second longest ride. We did a Mito Canada ride many years ago that was about the same distance, but that ride was in remembrance of a well-known endurance racer and 24-hour of adrenaline winner, Ryan Corey, who was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer in the same week that I was. And sadly, he did not survive, but his memory certainly lives on in the community. So.
What year was that? It was 2017, I think.
2017, July of 2017, yeah.
That week he did something epic, and so did you. You were both like kind of on the podiums of racing, and at the sort of within a day or two of each other, were both diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Ryan, he won the 24 hours of adrenaline, and he knew that something was wrong. He had a lot of pain, and he raced, and he raced through that pain. He won the race, and then sadly, his same doctor as me, Court Badgecoff here, he had a colonoscopy, and then they said, yeah, it was bad news. For myself, I knew something was wrong, and it had been going on for a good 4 or 5 months, but the triage to get the diagnosis, I just kept living with it and going through the process, paying attention to my body, training started to get harder and harder each month as each month went by. I mean, I went down to Mexico and rode with national speed skating team for 4 days, and Joe Gorowski banging off 200 kilometers a day in Jalisco State, and I was like, I don't know what I was doing to myself, but to get back to the point, the week previous, Ryan, he won the 24 hours of adrenaline, and I did the provincial masters road race and broke away with Stephen Mundy from Edmonton and dug real deep, and it's like left it all out there because I knew the next day I was going in for a scope, and I figured something wasn't right. So, and then the next day, it was stage 3.5 colon cancer. So,
wow,
65% risk of death, but triage quickly got into the system in Calgary. Amazing surgeons and cancer docs at Tom Baker and at Peter Lougheed Center there. They were confident I was physically fit, said you could beat it, and I just looked at it. I went about it like I would training. It was like, next year in my life is training for something completely different. Also, a big part of it was, getting that support from the community. to survive, right? Like if you're trying to, you can't do these things on your own. It's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I remember you're sharing quite a lot on like Instagram and Facebook and stuff, and just kind of watching that process, and it was like astounding. I guess to sort of going back on like in terms of the social and sharing, I don't feel like you're sharing quite as much, like, or as as deeply as you were at that time. Just any sort of observation or comment on that? Is it helpful to share that? You were sharing a lot, and it was. We were cheering from the distance for sure.
The day that I got a colonoscopy, I was conscious, and I saw that that's weird. There's an alien inside of me. It's a big tumor. Mm. And post procedure, my doctor, he told me to. Might get a little emotional here. He told me to enjoy my sunny days, and I was like, "What?" It was like first thought, my family. Second thought, life, and then third thought, oh, geez, it means I'm not going to be bike racing anymore. But I went through a couple of days of existential crisis, I guess you could call it, and it reminded me of the short story of a prisoner in the Spanish War gets death sentence. And then a couple of days later, they removed that death sentence. So I went through some really dark days, and then rather than internalizing it and suffering, and then having that come out perhaps negatively to the people around me, I thought, you know what, I'm going to share this. And that's my nature. That could be sometimes perceived as being a little bit self-centered, but actually I found that it inspired a lot of people, and people go one or two ways. I think when they are faced with a crisis like that, they either hold it all in, which that in itself is not healthy, or you can share it. And quickly, I was connected with other people in the community who were going through cancer, and they helped me along in the process. So wow. I'd also have to say that when my doctors, oncologists, radiologists, and surgeon, when they said that, you know what, like you're going to beat this, like you're really strong physically, and you're just going to have to do the steps. So wow, they were a little longer than I expected. I thought I'd be dead by Christmas, and then when I finished my surgery, I went through 8 weeks of chemo and radiation, recovered, had massive surgery. And then I thought it was done, and I'd start training again in January. But my oncologist, Dr. Jose Monzon, Tom Baker, he goes, well, now we have to do 6 months of chemotherapy just to make sure we get everything out of your body. And I'm like, well, okay. so that was a little bit of a surprise. So the one thing too, and to any of the listeners here, you have to ask questions. And sometimes you just don't know what those questions are. So, and the medical profession, they don't necessarily answer all of your questions, right? So you can't make assumptions. So you got to do a lot of fact finding, a lot of research. Nutrition is really important. Making sure that you do the right things to also help you succeed when you're doing.
Wow. Interesting. And James, we most recently connected again just in the past few days on Facebook of, our common group in Facebook. I think it's the AB Velo, maybe it's the group.
AB Velo, yeah.
And you asked the question, of the audience, due to your participation with, I think, the Alberta Bicycle Association. Actually, can you tell us a little bit about that position? And then the question that you asked to try to engage, our community.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm the vice president of racing. So I chair a racing committee, which kind of oversees race organizers, racers, upgrades, et cetera. But we haven't had racing, for almost 2 years now, 2 seasons. We've had some minor events going off. We had some track racing. But I was watching what's going on south of our border, and looking at, I'll get to south of the border. But I'm looking at the scene we've had here in Alberta over the last decade since I got back into racing in 2010, and it's been the same races each year, same events, same frequency. But I've also noticed, we're losing some events as well. We're losing our road races that are out on longer circuits, out on the highways, and it's getting harder to organize. And then I've been following the Legion Cycling down in the US, and these US crit series, and they're super exciting. And some people, when they hear the word criterium, say criterium short circuits, 1 kilometer. I mean, the most famous one is Tour de Boness. We've seen pretty epic crashes in there. But circuit races or closed circuits, I want to see if we can encourage maybe more of them, because I think it's also a good way to get kids racing as well, because it's safe, right? Because they're not on the way. And the more we do criterium racing, or even track racing for that matter, the better we get at handling our bike. The more nimble we become. But I also thought maybe having some structure and coming up with 3 different series, so road racing, criterium racing, and then throwing in some time trials, so we can kind of appease the 3 different communities. And at each month we can have expectation of doing a different type of race, and then throwing in some stage races in this as well. You know, stage races are lots of fun. We have one here in Canmore. We have Tour de Boness. We've had Velocity, but they're getting harder to organize as well. So, and for athletes, you know, it's a lot of commitment to take 3 days out of your life for masters and families, and to go and race. So,
what
and
is
also
that? Why are we losing them, and why are they getting harder to like host and organize? Is it liability or litigious society? Why? I actually have no clue. Why is it harder than it used to be?
I think getting permits to race on open roads.
And why is that harder? Is it litigious, like legal reasons? Why like the permits process is harder?
So I think it comes down to different communities and pushback from residents who are not in the cycling community, and they don't want people racing on the roads. And you know, I want to stay positive, but whenever I've done Tour de Boness, which is a fantastic race, Bob Grunwald, you know, Bob does a great job. But when I'm out on that Horse Creek Road, that loop there, it's a narrow road, and you got oncoming traffic, and you do get the odd vehicle that's just not happy that there's cyclists out there. So, and it's not a closed circuit, and it's the same here in Canmore. We have a wonderfully horrible road circuit that has a lot of climbing back and forth on the Three Sisters Parkway, and again, you know, having the permit to race on that, and then keeping traffic away from the peloton, it's harder. So there's an element of risk, and there's quite a bit of liability, and I think that brings some fear to an organizer. Right?
Interesting.
But on the flip side, it just quickly, like, there are some circuits, and we were talking about on that forum, like the Dogtown circuit, where the local residents or ranchers and farmers, there's not an issue there. It's about a 10-kilometer loop. It's exciting, and that one is easier for organizers to arrange. It's not too far away from medical support and hospitals, et cetera, et cetera.
And so I was surprised a little bit surprised in the sort of, I think you were kind of promoting or encouraging more crit style racing. You know, the comment was, well, the crashes happen more on crits. Any thoughts on that, or?
Well, you know, crashes do happen more. They can happen more in crits, and I've been involved in several. The 2 biggest crashes I've had over the last 10 years have been here in Canmore and at the Tour de Boness. But I don't find them to be as catastrophic as a road race, because you're at high speed, and when you crash, you tend to slide. You tend to slide out in the corner. Albeit, you know, when you're 5th or 6th wheel coming into that last corner, there's a quote I remember from one of Canada's most prolific bike racers, Gord Fraser, who won. He was a pro. He even raced in the Tour de France, and he won Gastown many times. And he said the difference between winning. If you want to win in a crit, you have to be prepared to either be first or go to the hospital. So that's a bit extreme, but when races are fast and the peloton's strung out, I find them to be quite safe. It's when they bunch up and the race slows down that danger can happen. But it also depends on the course design. And I think the more we do it, the less it happens. But I've seen, you know, when we're road racing though, like the most impactful and horrendous big crashes that result in ambulance trips to the hospital, I find them happening. Right. So you can be traveling at higher rates of speed. You're on a narrow road, and you don't have fencing and padding to go into. and I think we can recall Velocity. There's been some, up in Edmonton the last time we raced in 2017, mass pile up and Cat 4 race that resulted in multiple injuries. That kind of comes down to weather, course design, etc.
Interesting. James, I kind of want to step away and go a little slightly different direction. I guess it must have been like when you started racing, and I think I started my first road race was sometime after doing a triathlon in 2009 or something with Nicholas Group. And I think you mentioned that you started in 2010 back again after your teenage days. So we would have both been like in our sort of early-ish mid 40s, starting racing again. And I remember getting to Cat 3 reasonably quickly. Maybe it took 2 or 3 years. And I remember you get stuck in Cat 5 for way longer than you should have been. And that, to me, that was like unbelievable, but sort of like truthful in the way that we had these quite a few like really fast guys, like Olympian type fellows like Robin Clegg and, speed skaters. They just get ripping through the system. I just can't remember. Do you have any comment on that? How long were you in Cat 5 before like rolling up the ranks finally to Cat 1, 2? And like, to me, it was just like so funny that you'd show up a race and you're doing, really well, but then, the Olympian would show up and just take it.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, Robin Clegg, he was with us in RMCC. We went out and recruited a bunch of the retired 2010 Olympians.
Oh, that's what happened. It was your own fault then.
Yeah, and I was his domestique in the Banff Bike Fest. So I my first race back was 2010, Velocity. I was dead last, and thought, okay, this is a starting point. It took me 1.5 seasons, so I raced that year, did a couple races, and then in 2011, ramped up pretty quick, got into Cat 4, got into Cat 3 in one season. The following, I got up to Cat 2. The goal was to get into Cat 3 because I wanted to go down and race in the Mountain Head Cycling Class down in the US.
Oh.
The trick to get out of Cat 5 is to not blow up in the first 20 minutes and then attack and then just take off, right? Or in a crit, attack on the gun and drop half the field.
Yeah.
And then use, in full disclosure, I admit I use time trials. Time trials where I got the majority of my points. So.
Okay. How come you're so good at time trial?
Well, when I was a kid, that's what I did. I was multi-sport out, multi-discipline on the bike, but I had a big engine and good aerobic capacity and really good threshold. I just sold my time trial bike though. I thought, I don't want to do time trial, so I just want to do the short, sharp, the fun stuff, right? So, I don't know why we have this fascination with stuff for TT bike.
Yeah. Do you see yourself ever owning another TT bike?
I've thought about it, but my goal in the future is to do some ITU work, some ITU triathlon, and which is more a road bike. And I'm looking at a Trek Madone that has a system set up where you can put on the bars, but no, for dabbling back in triathlon, it's going to be just Olympic distance stuff, and I don't see the need to have a TT bike.
So I see you as like almost a true roadie, and actually that's your Twitter handle, Roadie James, Roadie_James, isn't it? And so, how come you're even allowed to talk about triathlon? And for the roadies in our audience, isn't that like, one of the cycling rules is a bike ride a run shall never follow a bike ride.
Yeah, that is one of the rules. But I started life as a swimmer. My brothers were swimmers. I was a swimmer. I used to swim. One of my peers, I can't say I ever got up to his level, but for a time I was swimming with Mark Tewksbury when I was 11, 12, 13 years old, and so I developed all that muscle memory. I do like swimming. And my oldest brother, who I think Keith.
Yeah.
Victoria. There's three of us. I got two brothers, two sisters, but two brothers. Keith is he's the Iron Man. He likes to go out and suffer forever. My other brother, Jason, ex-fighter pilot, lives in Hong Kong. He likes downhill mountain bike racing. He's an adrenaline junkie. I have both of them in me. So, I like to suffer, but I don't like to suffer for more than 3 or 4 hours. And the thing about triathlon, Bryon, is that 2019 I did my first triathlons. I did 2 back-to-back, which I realized was a bit much to do them back-to-back. But it was it's completely different than road racing. You have to plan it, and you have to pace yourself properly. I learned you can't go too deep on the bike. Great if you come out of the water fast, but that's not a big deal. And then running. So I like challenges, and running is something that takes a lot of work for me. It's not something I did as a kid. I don't have that muscle memory. I stopped running this past winter, and then when you're trying to get back into running, it
takes a long time. Don't
but
stop.
I find trail running outside of cycling, trail running, and like the Xterra is great for that, for the run. But I find running to be quite free, and I live on the side of a mountain and get up on the mountain trail. I call it what do I call it? Trail.
Oh, what trail?
Trail surfing.
Trail surfing. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. I love it. I'm going to be up at your, I'm spending 3 days in Canmore, Friday, Saturday, Sunday this week for a ride called Ride Through the Rockies for Habitat for Humanity. And so it's a small group of about 30 of us. And so I may reach out to you to try to hook up for that surf run.
Okay.
If I can, or if you can. James, I was on a coaching call a little earlier this morning prior to our call here today. And my real estate coach actually said to me, we need to plug into our gifts, talents, and abilities. It seems to me that you're doing that well. And you do that for the cycling community. I kind of want to throw that out there and ask about your involvement a little bit with our cycling community, as well as maybe incorporating that into my sort of interest or our shared interest in we're getting, I don't want to speak for you, but we're similar age, but I'll speak for myself. Like, we're getting old. I'm 55 this year. But I still love to race. Like, what is it about, shouldn't we be not racing anymore at this age? Anyway, tell me a little bit about your gifts, talents, and abilities. I mean, going through in recent years, you've gone through like almost death experience, I think. And you're still with us and plan to be for a long time. And it seems to me that you are stepping up in our community and being a leader and using your gifts, talents, and abilities to drive cycling in Alberta. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So what got me, when I started racing again, I was also managing a hotel in Banff, the Juniper Hotel, and the president at the time of the Round Mountain Cycling Club. And I was trying to get connected to the cycling community, and I found it was like, well, how do you connect with the cycling? How do you connect with the bike clubs? I went to bike shops, which for me, when I was a junior, it's like that was your hub. That you went to a bike shop, and bike shops near in town were like, yeah, no, we don't have cycling clubs. And somehow I got connected with Jeff Perrin, and when he found out I was managing, an organization in Banff, he's like, hey, would you consider sponsoring the Run Mountain Cycling Club? So I approached my employers. I was general manager of the hotel at the time, and we came in as a sponsor, multi-year deal with RMCC, and then Jeff said, hey, maybe you'd like to be the treasurer. It's like, I'd love to, right? So it was, that to me was like, now I'm getting connected to a community. And a couple things. One, I mean, I spent 30 years plus in hospitality, so you're always in the service of other people. So that was a learned thing for me. I wasn't born into that. And then I was reminded of when I was a junior that there were people that, gave of themselves to volunteer and coach youth and support grassroots organizations, nonprofits, because nonprofits can't succeed without that people like ourselves giving up their time, right? But it gave me a sense of purpose. It's not, it wasn't a materialistic thing. It wasn't, I've got a car, I feel great about that. I derived this enjoyment, and I felt a new sense of purpose. And it sometimes maybe a little bit too much from my wife to say, hey, you can't do everything. I sit on 3 boards. I sit on the ABA, the RMCC, and the swim club. My daughter's swimming now. But it also ties into something that I think it's important for athletes, and something that we need to teach young athletes is the concept of the long-term athlete development program. We learn to train, we learn to compete, and then we learn to and then we race, but then we have to learn to volunteer, because it's a circle. It goes full circle, right? Because if we don't give back as masters and older athletes or citizens to our community, then how do we inspire the next generation? Or how do we get people racing? And the other thing that's interesting in the cycling community, at least when I was young, is there were lots of youth who came from broken families, latchkey kids back in the 70s and the 80s. So my parents were divorced, and I didn't see my father very much as a teenager. And so I latched on to that coach, that mentor, and that was an indelible experience. Never left me. His name was Robert Gilchrist. He's still around in Edmonton. He's connected with Juventus. And it just makes you feel good. Like, I'm currently working with the Run the Mountain Cycling Club as the vice president, but we started this grassroots program coaching kids, 12 and 13 years old, 11 to 13 years old. Every Friday night we go for a road ride, and oh my God, it's so much fun, right? So, and they listen, like they're little sieves. Like we taught them how to do a pace line 2 weeks ago, and I said, I can't even get adults to do this, right? So I know you're going to do it when you get older, if you ever become a bike racer. The other thing, about community, I got to ride last week with Carla Shilby, who's a blind para athlete, and her pilot Megan. We rode 200 kilometers last Friday, and I learned her story and the obstacles she had to overcome. And sport brought her out of a dark place, and that's the other thing we have to watch out for our youth, is that if they are facing obstacles, challenges in life, sport will keep them on the path and on the right path, right? And Carla this Friday is meeting with, we have this kids program, the bike, it's an all girls program. There's a dozen girls under the age of 15. They're going to the track on Friday night, and Carla's going to meet them at 8 o'clock and talk to them about, body image, obstacles, how to meet challenges.
Awesome.
So perhaps I've answered your question, but I also, on a business side of things, if we were to get into business, it also, I think it becomes part of your brand as well, right? Like, people, acknowledge, hey, you're a community-minded person. And, I've had roots in Canmore now since 2009, and when I got sick, I didn't realize, how important it is when you're connected to your community, that when you need it back, that community steps up and they come to your support. Like, I got through cancer even financially because I had the backing of my business partner, and I had the backing of all of those people that you met through those times of volunteering.
Awesome. What's your current startup?
Or
if you can divulge right now, or if this is a good time.
Yeah, I can. I mean, startup sounds kind of sexy, like high tech stuff. But
does cool.
Again, yeah, it's nothing high tech, but. We're working on a project in Spring Creek. Spring Creek Developments is, I'm sure you're familiar with Spring Creek, but it's in the center of Canmore. Lots of build out of vacation rentals and that. But there's a new building going up called the Tamarack, and there's 10,000 square foot retail space. And we're building a business that's going to be a grocerant, so a niche grocery store and cafe.
Oh, nice.
We're just in the final days of lease negotiation, and then once that's done, hopefully construction starts December 1, and then opening in June of 2022.
Well, good for you. That's ballsy, I think, and actually brings me back some memories of where you and I first met in person, and it was Velo Cafe, and their seemed niche grocery store, which is no longer in business, sadly.
That's right. Yeah.
And then I heard a couple of years ago when Speed Theory was going out of business in downtown Charlotte or downtown Calgary, that there was 5,000 independent bike stores going out of business that year, like 2 years ago, maybe just a year ago. And in North America, 5,000 independent bike stores. That seems to have changed. There's been a shift since COVID, I think. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, if some of those bike shops had just hung on, like a Speed Theory had just hung on a couple more months with all that
Yeah.
inventory, which they sold at a discount, they might have survived. Calgary's, it's different, right? Especially in the downtown core, I think they were highly dependent on office workers in downtown.
It seems
It
like the
would have
bike
been,
shop is doing really well, and especially with their beautiful new store on McLeod Trail. I've
yeah,
noticed that.
especially,
Yeah.
if they have inventory, I think inventory
Right.
channels are starting to improve. But service. I think COVID brought a lot of people out of the woodwork to exercise because they had free time, right? You're stuck at home. Well, let's get outside. So go buy a bike. We certainly see it here in Canmore on the Legacy Trail. Just surpassed 1 million users over the past 10 years. And bike rental businesses are popping up. The bike shops are busy. Services, their service departments, I think, is what's really keeping them afloat until the inventory comes back. So, with our project here, we're certainly not going into it blind, and we've been working with some consultants. And Canmore is underserved. Like, it does not have enough square footage to meet the needs of in the grocery sector. And the demographics here, as you know, Bryon, like this is high net worth town, and there's a hole that needs to be filled. So,
good.
And I'm quite confident. Yeah, sorry.
When can we expect to go grab a coffee and have buy groceries at the store?
June of next year.
Great. And what's the name? What's the name we should be looking for?
So the name that's on deck right now is the Willow Cafe and Grocery.
Okay. The Willow Cafe and Grocery, June of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
James, we're coming up to I think a half an hour. Our listeners are going to start to get angry with us because they want the goods. Let's sort of try to bring this to a close. James, what kind of ask would you have from our viewers, from our listeners, if there was an ask? And maybe along the question I'll ask is, if you had a billboard, what would it say?
If I had a billboard, what would I say? Well, the thing that I've learned, and then I think that's an important one, is always keep moving forward.
Nice.
And the ask that I would have is that if you can give of yourself to others, find time to do it. You will reap many more rewards than you could ever expect, especially when it comes to.
That's terrific. Agree entirely. The more you give, the more you get back. Wonderful. Well, James, how can people reach out to you? What's the best way? And how do people connect?
Well, Instagram is my favorite medium. It's Roadie_James. I'm on there. You can also find me on Facebook. It's just James Kendal. There's only 2 of us with that name. I have a doppelganger down in California with the same name, but I'm on there. If you're in Canmore, on Mondays or Tuesdays, pop by the Cellar Door Wine Shop where I've parked my hat there. I love wine, so I'm helping my friend Allison with her shop until we get this grocery store going. So
Monday and Tuesdays, is that right?
Mondays and Tuesdays, yeah, that's right. And if you want to go for a ride, well, reach out to me then too. So.
Monday and Tuesdays. And what's that wine store called in Canmore that we can find you?
The Cellar Door.
Oh, the Cellar Door, of course. Yeah. Excellent. Well, James, thanks very much for being on the show. I'm going to reach out to you this weekend and see if I can go on a surf trail run with you. I'll be doing lots of riding with my group from Habitat for Humanity, and ride through the Rockies for a small group of about 20 on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So be looking for an early morning or late afternoon short run as I prepare for Ironman Canada as I age group up this year.
Oh, hey, good luck with that, Ryan. I'm proud of you for doing that. That's huge.
Well, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Over and out.
All right. Cheers, man. Take care.
I'll just stop recording.